Right now, tonight, you are going to do something that took our species roughly 300,000 years to figure out. You're going to lie down, close your eyes, and hand over total control of your body to the darkness. No weapon, no lock on the door that actually matters, no idea what is moving outside. And somehow, you will do it without thinking twice because someone, a very long time ago, already solved this problem for you. How did ancient humans, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, actually manage to fall asleep at all? And what did they have to build, invent, and figure out just to survive the night? Stick around because the answer gets stranger the deeper you go. And if any of this messes with how you think about your own bedtime routine, stay until the end. Because there is a decent chance you will never look at your mattress the same way again. And if you like this kind of deep dive into the ancient world, subscribing genuinely helps more of these reach you. Let's start with the obvious problem. Sleep is, biologically speaking, insane. For roughly a third of every single day, a human being becomes almost completely useless. You cannot see. You cannot hear properly. Your muscles go slack. Your reaction time collapses. In evolutionary terms, that is a catastrophic amount of exposure. Every predator on the African savanna, every rival group, every venomous thing that crawls at night, all of it had a clear shot at you, and you would not even know it was happening. And yet sleep never got selected out of us. If anything, evolution protected it fiercely, which tells you something important right away. Sleep was never optional. It was too valuable to lose, which means the real story is not why humans slept, it is how they managed to make something this dangerous survivable. The first answer is older than you probably think, and it starts underground, or more specifically in a cave in South Africa. At a site called Sibudu Cave, archaeologists led by Lyn Wadley uncovered layers of ancient bedding dating back roughly 77,000 years. Not scattered leaves, not random plant matter, actual constructed sleeping mats made from bundled sedges and rushes, layered deliberately and repeatedly rebuilt over thousands of years of use. That alone is remarkable. But the detail that made researchers sit up was what was mixed into those layers. Traces of a plant called Cryptocarya woodii, a species known to contain natural insecticidal and larvicidal compounds. In other words, tens of thousands of years before anyone understood what a mosquito actually carried, ancient humans were already lining their beds with something that chemically repelled the insects trying to bite them while they slept. That is not an accident. That is applied knowledge, tested, remembered, and passed down. Before agriculture, before pottery, before almost anything we consider civilization, humans had already invented pest control for their bedroom, so bedding solved one problem. But bedding does not solve the biggest one, which is this. Even with a comfortable mat, you are still unconscious, and unconscious in the wild is still a death sentence waiting to happen, unless you deal with the actual predators. This is where fire changes everything. Richard Wrangham, a primatologist at Harvard, has argued that the controlled use of fire may be one of the single most important turning points in human evolution, and sleep is a huge part of that argument. A fire does three things simultaneously. It provides warmth, which matters enormously once humans started sleeping on the ground instead of curled up in trees like their ancestors. It provides light, which pushes back the range at which a predator can approach unseen. And it provides deterrence because almost every large predator on Earth has an instinctive aversion to open flame. Suddenly, sleeping on open ground was not the reckless gamble it should have been. A ring of firelight created something close to an artificial safe zone, and that single technology may have done more to make consistent, deep, restorative human sleep possible than almost anything else our ancestors ever built. But fire alone was not enough, because fire has to be maintained. and a maintained fire needs someone awake to feed it. Which brings us to one of the strangest and most overlooked survival technologies of all: the group itself. Modern research on hunter-gatherer societies gives us a genuinely fascinating window into this. Anthropologists studying groups like the Hadza in Tanzania and the San in the Kalahari have documented something researchers call the sentinel pattern. In a group sleeping together, not everyone is in the same sleep stage at the same time. At almost any given moment during the night, at least one member of the group is in a lighter stage of sleep or briefly awake, whether they realize it or not. Multiply that across a group of 15 or 20 people, and what you get is a rolling, informal night watch that nobody has to consciously organize. Nobody assigns shifts. Nobody sets an alarm. The staggered, overlapping rhythms of human sleep cycles create constant low-level vigilance across the whole camp, almost like a biological alarm system built entirely out of randomness. Sleeping in a group was not just about warmth or comfort, it was a defense mechanism engineered by evolution itself, long before anyone understood why it worked. Now here is where the story takes a turn that surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time, because ancient humans may not have slept the way you assume they did at all. For decades, the popular image of prehistoric sleep was simple. The sun goes down, everyone lies down, everyone sleeps straight through until morning, just like most of us try to do today. But historian Roger Ekirch, digging through centuries of pre-industrial records, court documents, diaries, and medical texts, found something strange. Repeated casual references to a first sleep and a second sleep, with a period of quiet wakefulness in between, sometimes an hour or more, used for prayer, conversation, sex, or simply lying calmly in the dark before drifting off again. This pattern, now often called biphasic or segmented sleep, appears so consistently across pre-industrial societies that many researchers now believe it may reflect something much older than medieval Europe. Without artificial light forcing everyone into a single continuous block of darkness, followed by a single continuous block of sleep, the human body may naturally default to two separate sleep phases, broken up by a stretch of calm, alert rest in the deep of the night. If that is true, then the 8-hour uninterrupted sleep most of us chase every night might not be the ancestral norm at all. It might be a relatively recent invention, made possible only once electric light let us push bedtime later and compress the whole process into a single block. And this connects to something even more counterintuitive. A landmark study led by sleep researcher Jerome Siegel at UCLA monitored 3 modern hunter-gatherer and hunter-horticulturalist societies with no access to electricity, groups whose lifestyle closely resembles that of ancient humans. The expectation going in was that these groups would sleep far more than people in industrialized societies, closer to the 10 hours often assumed for our ancestors. The actual data showed the opposite. These groups slept on average less than 7 hours a night. They rarely napped. And strikingly, they almost never reported insomnia, a condition that affects a huge percentage of people in the modern world. Their bodies were tightly synced to actual environmental temperature and light, not to a clock, not to a screen, and not to anxiety about the next day. Sleep onset in these groups reliably began several hours after sunset, once ambient temperature had genuinely dropped, and ended close to sunrise, almost regardless of what time of year it was, which suggests the whole process was being driven by environmental cues rather than habit, culture, or personal preference. Ancient humans, it seems, were not sleeping longer than we do. They may have simply been sleeping better, because their entire environment was built, without anyone planning it, to support the process instead of fighting against it, which raises the obvious question. If they were not sleeping on soft mattresses in climate-controlled rooms, how did their bodies even know when it was time to shut down? The answer is temperature, and it runs deeper into your biology than you might expect. Your core body temperature naturally drops in the hours before sleep, and that drop is one of the primary internal signals your brain uses to trigger drowsiness. In a world without artificial heating or cooling, ancient humans experienced this temperature shift directly and dramatically, following the natural fall of evening air after sunset. Some researchers argue this is part of why sleeping near flowing water or in slightly cooler, elevated positions became common in certain environments, since a gentle drop in ambient temperature after dark would have reinforced the body's own internal signal to power down. Modern humans, surrounded by artificial heating, often blunt or delay that natural temperature drop, which may be part of why so many people struggle to fall asleep at a reasonable hour today. Our ancient ancestors were not fighting their biology. They were living directly inside it. There is also the moon to consider, and this part genuinely surprised researchers when they first noticed it. That same study of modern hunter-gatherer groups living without electricity found something unexpected when the data was cross-referenced against lunar cycles. Sleep onset shifted and total sleep time shortened slightly in the nights leading up to a full moon, even though none of the participants were consciously tracking the lunar calendar or thinking about it at all. The most likely explanation is simple. Moonlight, especially a bright, nearly full moon on a clear night, provided just enough extra illumination to extend useful activity later into the evening and to subtly suppress the same light-sensitive signals that trigger drowsiness after sunset. For nearly the entire span of human existence, before oil lamps, before candles, before electric light, the moon was the single biggest variable capable of shifting an entire community's sleep schedule on any given night. Ancient humans were not just responding to the sun. They were living inside a two-light system, sun and moon, and their sleep patterns bent around both of them in ways almost nobody thinks about today. Dreams themselves may have played a functional role too, one that goes beyond simple biology. Anthropological accounts from a wide range of traditional societies describe dreams being shared and discussed openly each morning, treated not as private mental noise, but as meaningful information, sometimes tied to problem solving, sometimes tied to warnings, sometimes woven directly into a group's storytelling and belief systems. Some researchers studying sleep and cognition suggest this morning ritual of dream sharing may have served a genuine psychological function, helping process fear, stress, and the accumulated tension of a dangerous environment through communal interpretation rather than silent, isolated worry. In a world with constant real threats, a structured way to talk through unconscious fear every morning as a group may have been almost as important to survival as the physical defenses built around the sleeping area itself. Sleeping location itself became its own kind of technology. In parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, archaeological and ethnographic evidence points to elevated sleeping platforms built above the ground on simple wooden frames. The logic is straightforward once you think about it. Ground level is where snakes travel, where scorpions hide, where biting insects are thickest, and where flash flooding or sudden water can catch you completely off guard. Even a modest platform, raised only a foot or two off the dirt, dramatically reduces exposure to almost all of those threats at once. Caves offered a different but related solution: natural shelter with a single defensible entrance, reducing the directions from which danger could approach while sleeping. Some groups took this even further, choosing sites near cliff faces or narrow rock overhangs specifically because the terrain itself removed entire angles of approach, turning geography into a kind of passive security system that required no construction at all, just careful observation of the landscape and a willingness to walk a little further to find the right spot. Excavations at sites associated with Neanderthals show similar behavior. Distinct areas within cave systems apparently set aside specifically for rest, sometimes located near the warmth of a hearth, but angled away from smoke, showing a level of spatial planning around sleep that goes back well before modern humans even existed. Then there is the shift that changed everything, the one most people never even think to connect to their own sleep: agriculture. Once humans stopped moving with the seasons and started building permanent settlements, sleep changed in ways that rippled forward for thousands of years. Solid walls replaced the open perimeter of a hunting camp. Doors replaced constant group vigilance. For the first time, a person could sleep without a fire burning nearby and without another set of eyes half open nearby, because the structure itself was doing that job now. Beds, in the form we would recognize today, start appearing in the archaeological record around this same period. Raised wooden frames, woven supports, and eventually cushioned surfaces, replacing the simple bundled mats used for tens of thousands of years before. Sleep stopped being a shared survival task performed by a group and slowly became a private, individual act performed behind a closed door. That single shift, walls and doors replacing fire and vigilance, may be one of the most underappreciated turning points in the entire history of human rest, and in many ways, it is the direct ancestor of the bedroom you sleep in tonight. So when you put all of this together, a picture starts to form that looks nothing like the popular image of ancient humans just collapsing wherever they happen to be standing at the end of the day. They built insect-repelling bedding out of chemistry they could not name but clearly understood through trial and observation. They used fire not just for warmth, but as an active nightly defense system. They slept in groups that created accidental rolling security through nothing more than the natural rhythm of overlapping sleep cycles. Their bodies likely split the night into two distinct phases rather than one continuous block, guided by darkness instead of alarm clocks. Their sleep synced tightly to real temperature and real light instead of artificial substitutes. And they engineered their physical sleeping space, whether that meant a raised platform, a defensible cave, or eventually solid walls, specifically around the threats they knew were out there in the dark. None of it was random. None of it was luck. Every piece was a small, tested solution to the single most dangerous, vulnerable hours of the human day, refined generation after generation, until the version of sleep you take completely for granted tonight became possible at all. Bedding, fire, group vigilance, timing, temperature, location, and even the shared meaning pulled from dreams. None of it happened by accident, and all of it had to work together at once, every single night, for hundreds of thousands of years, just to get one exhausted, half-blind, barely armed species safely from dusk to dawn. If you found this as strange and fascinating as I did putting it together, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Because there is a lot more of ancient human history like this coming, the kind of stories that quietly explain the most ordinary parts of your everyday life. And before you go, I am genuinely curious. If you had to fall asleep tonight the way your ancestors did, no walls, no locked door, nothing but a fire and a few other people around you, do you think you could actually relax enough to sleep? Let me know down in the comments. Until next time, see you soon.